Hello and welcome to today's webinar. My name is Trevor. I'm the Communications Manager for the Canadian Cancer Survivor Network. Thank you for everyone for attending this webinar today, and this is the latest in our spring leg of our 2025 webinar series. If you are new to our webinar series, a little background on our group. CCSN works to connect patients, survivors, and other stakeholder groups with decision makers and the wider community to engage in discussion and to act on evidence-based best practices to alleviate the medical, emotional, financial, and social costs of cancer. To learn more, visit survivornet.ca. This webinar is being recorded and it will be available on YouTube with a link to the email that you registered with. And you can also find the slides to this presentation with that email as well. We'll have a quick Q&A session at the end, but if you would like, please do not consider waiting. Just put your question into the questions tab on the GoToWebinar screen. And now to present our presenter. Ellyn Winters-Robinson is a breast cancer survivor, in-demand speaker, a women's health advocate, professional communicator, and a globally recognized health rebel. She is the author of the best-selling book, Flat Please, Hold the Shame, a girlfriend's companion guide to those on breast cancer, the breast cancer journey, and the real woman behind the global AI phenomenon, AskEllyn.ai, the world's first conversational AI companion for those on the breast cancer journey. Ellyn's story and AskEllyn.ai have been featured in People Magazine, Chatelaine Magazine, The Globe and Mail, CTV National News, and Your Morning and Fast Company. I'd like to hand it over to Ellyn Winters-Robinson for her talk. Take it away.
Hi there, Trevor. Thank you so much. And thank you all for coming today, or for those that are going to be listening in at a later date. So as Trevor mentioned, I am a breast cancer survivor. And in fact, it was 3 years ago to this month that I was learning that I had a cancer diagnosis and was going through that fact-finding mission that we all know so well, which is, meeting with doctors and trying to understand what was next in terms of the disease. I'm going to, Trevor, if you don't mind just moving forward a slide, I'm going to actually start by talking about a butterfly. And you're probably going to think, what the heck? I thought we were here talking about breast cancer, but we're actually going to talk about butterflies first. Because there is this phenomena that some of you may be familiar with, and it's called the butterfly effect. And it actually goes back to the 1960s. It's actually an element of chaos theory, if you're into math. I'm not. But the butterfly effect, it was established initially to talk about weather patterns and how this very simple, gentle rainstorm in one part of the world could actually create a hurricane in another part of the world. And it's now been sort of used to describe a phenomena of that sort of chance encounter that leads to something bigger. And that's really my experience. So this is not just a story about me getting cancer and what happened next, but it's about this magnifying effect of the butterfly. But let me take you back. I want to take you back to 3 years ago. And it was literally this week that I would have had my biopsy. Trevor, if you don't mind, the next slide. We all know those emotions. This is me. It's actually probably about a month from now. It's the day before I'm having my double mastectomy. And I sort of providentially wanted to capture how I was feeling and the emotions I was feeling on that day. Yes, so in March of 2022, I found out I had multifocal breast cancer. So I had 3 tumors in my left breast. Weirdly, it was 2 years and almost a month from my last mammogram, which was perfectly clear. On April 6th, I had a biopsy and was told by the surgeon that examined me that I would be likely needing a mastectomy, chemotherapy, and radiation. And I hadn't even had my biopsy yet. I was all alone. And then it was actually 2 days before my birthday. And as he left the room after telling me this news, he wished me a happy birthday. And it unfortunately turned out to be true. So on May the 31st, I had a double mastectomy, choosing to go flat. And then after the pathology came back from my surgery, it was determined I had microscopic amounts of cancer in my lymph nodes on the left side. And so that put me into 12 weeks of chemo, and then I was followed up with 15 rounds of radiation. So any out there that don't know what this is like, you're on this forced march. So I think the healthcare system owned me for about 260 days. And there was so much I think all of us can rethink back on how bewildered we are, how we sort of question how we're actually sitting in this room talking to this doctor hearing that we have cancer. It was my first trip through the Canadian healthcare system, other than having 2 babies in hospital. And I was just so shocked at how much I didn't know. This was always going to happen to somebody else, not me. I had no family history, all of those things. And there were so many things that just now I know, and I want to share with others out there who, again, are also sort of in this place of denial. Trevor, if you don't mind moving to the next slide. One of the first things I didn't know was that I was going to be 1 in 8 women who will get breast cancer in their lifetime. So there's 2.3 million women that are diagnosed with breast cancer every year in the world. So there's about 30,000 of us here in Canada, 300,000 in the United States. So it is a sobering statistic. And I remember when I was first diagnosed and I finally sort of sat on the news and then decided to share it on Facebook. And I remember this reaction of shock and awe coming back from friends who knew me to be the healthy girl, who was a bit of a fitness nut. And they were just absolutely so shocked that I had been the one that had been diagnosed with breast cancer. And I remember at the time, 17 of my friends all raised their hands and in support said that they would go for mammograms because of my diagnosis. And I remember saying to a friend of mine, wow, if that 1 in 8 is a correct number, someone in that group is going to come back with cancer. And sure enough, within 2 weeks of these women all raising their hand, 2 of my good friends were diagnosed with stage 1 breast cancer. So that number is very true. The other thing that I didn't know, Trevor, if you don't mind advancing, was that only 11% of women worldwide are screened for any type of cancer. That was a shocking statistic for me. So there are women in many countries in the world who are not seeing doctors, who are not being screened for any type of cancer. So that number I mentioned to you, that 2.38 million women that are going to be diagnosed with breast cancer this year globally, that is probably an incredibly underrepresented number. And the WHO is also indicating that by 2040, our numbers are going to be soaring, especially in low to middle income countries. The other thing I didn't know, Trevor, if you don't mind, is that breast cancer is not an old lady's disease. Sure, I was 57 when I was diagnosed, so I was kind of the classic quintessential middle-aged white woman with breast cancer. But these are 3 friends of mine. So this is Taro, this is Robin, and oh my gosh, Beth. There we go. Sorry, brain fart. They are respectively. Taro was 29 when she was diagnosed. Robin was 24 when she was diagnosed, and Beth was 32. She was just 6 months out from having her 3rd baby. And all 3 of these women, again, had no family history. They were absolutely shocked, and their lives have been turned upside down because of their cancer diagnosis. They are young women in the peak of their lives. They're dating, maybe early married. They are now thrust into a world where they're going to be on medications. They've been put into menopause, and I just had no idea. And the shocking truth of it is that younger women are developing breast cancer at an alarming rate. There's some research that came out from University of Ottawa, Dr. Jean Seeley and Dr. Ann Wilkinson, that talks about the double-digit percentage rise in young women in their 20s and 30s that are developing breast cancer. We don't know why, but it is a very scary thing, especially knowing that these women are not not eligible to be screened for any type of breast cancer. So they're very much on their own in terms of what they can do. Trevor, if you don't mind, just a few more I didn't knows. I didn't know that there were 12 different types of breast cancer. I checked my breasts often, but I didn't always know what I was looking for. And I had so many women after I was diagnosed ask me, like, what does a lump feel like? But it doesn't always present as a lump. Sometimes it's a red patch. Sometimes it's an orange peel type. In my case, it was a thickening that I just chalked up to an area of density in my breast. And my doctor wasn't concerned when she first looked at it. And I had been to the doctor a year before presenting with a concern, and everybody said it was nothing to worry about. And of course, that's what you want to hear. The next slide over, Trevor. I didn't know that 85% of breast cancer diagnosis has no connection to a genetic or family history. That was a shocking thing. And I think that doctors are somewhat at fault here in that they lull us into complacency by asking us almost in that first conversation that we might have if we present with a concern, whether we have any kind of a family history or not. And so it is really important that we understand that breast cancer can happen to anyone. As long as you're a woman and you have breasts, you are a likely candidate to develop breast cancer. And if you could advance to the next slide. And I didn't know that 50 was that 50 was not enough for screening. And we have fought very hard. And there are most of the provinces in Canada have just recently moved screening from 50 to 40 because we are not catching cancers. We need to move quicker and we need to move more aggressively so that we are saving women's lives. So as a transition into the rest of the presentation and sort of this butterfly effect and where it's taken my life, the other thing that shocked me, and I certainly felt it myself, was that 1 in 4 women who are diagnosed with breast cancer will develop post-traumatic stress disorder. It is not easy. And I think those of you out there that are dealing with a diagnosis or have had a diagnosis will understand that, you know, you're sort of go through that shock and trauma in the beginning, and then you kind of put your head down and just get the treatments done. But then at the end, it's actually often I hear from people, and I certainly felt it myself, that the trauma really kicks in after the treatments are over and you're released from active care or active treatment. And it's almost like we have Stockholm syndrome. We don't know what to do with ourselves and we don't know who to turn to. And there's no follow-up scans for some of us. And so it is a tremendously traumatic time. It's something I'm still dealing with. If you can go to the next slide, Trevor. This is how I felt, but it's also how others feel. This was a statement that I saw in one of the Facebook groups that I belong to, where this woman she felt so incredibly alone in her diagnosis, but at the same time was being ordered around and had no sense of control. So it is incredibly frustrating, both mentally and physically. So what does that mean? We go to the butterfly came back again. All of this knowledge created this passion in me to want to do something different for those who might follow in my footsteps. Trevor, can you flip to the next slide? So the butterfly came back into my life again. The first thing I wanted to do was to be unashamed about some of the decisions that I made. It's amazing to me, it's bewildering to me that there is still a tremendous amount of shame associated with a cancer diagnosis. People don't talk about it, people bury it under the rug, people blame themselves for what has happened, that they didn't do something right. And for me in particular, there was another element of shame, which was that I opted not to have breast mound reconstruction. I decided to stay flat. And I remember Googling, I'm a bit of a fashion victim, and I remember Googling, looking for instructions or some comfort that I could continue to wear the clothes that I loved. And what was coming back was that I was supposed to be ashamed of my body, that I was supposed to hide away with a scarf around my neck, never wear spaghetti straps, be ashamed of my scars. And that didn't sit well with me. And so I started what was the first sort of brush of the butterfly's wing. I wrote an article for the Globe and Mail that talked about the fact that I was unashamedly flat, that there should be no shame associated with a woman who's had breast cancer and has made a choice to save her life, that supermodels are flat, and yet women who are artificially made so by a surgeon's knife are somehow less than. And what I didn't expect was the reaction to this article. It was absolutely overwhelming. People were finding me, they were coming in through LinkedIn, they were finding my emails, they were going out of their way to find my email, and they reached out and said, "You've spoken to me, you have spoken my truth." And I had just no idea that others felt the same way. So it lit a fire under me. Trevor, you can go to the next slide, and we can move through the next few quite quickly. So I wanted to turn loneliness, that loneliness we felt, into companionship. I wanted to take the shame that we all felt, and I wanted to turn that into self-acceptance. And I wanted to take that feeling, that representation that women with breast cancer are somehow broken and sick. I wanted to turn that into a picture of someone who is thriving. So as you can see, I'm thriving in this picture. I'm waving my that wig is called Veronica, and I'm waving her proudly, and I'm in the middle of chemotherapy at this point, but I don't look sick or broken by any means. If you can go to the next slide. So it's interesting, any of you that have just recently watched the last episode of White Lotus, because I know all of us are doing so, that episode is actually entitled Amor Fati, which I thought was kind of interesting. So quite early on, when I was first diagnosed, a friend of mine gifted me a book called The Daily Stoic. And I started delving into the principles of Stoicism. So this is going back to Roman philosophy. But there are two principles that guide Stoicism. One is memento mori, which means in Latin that everyone dies. And it's true that none of us get out of this life alive. But at the same time, hearing everyone dies when you're first diagnosed with cancer wasn't exactly sitting too comfortably with me. But the other principle that I did find very comforting was this principle of amor fati, which means love your fate. And this idea, I think it's really at the end of at the crux of it, it's about acceptance. It's about acceptance that we're now on a new path, that this has happened, and that we're going to seek to understand and seek to learn from our experience. And that principle really guides me to this day, that I've chosen that, what has happened to me, what happens to many of us, that there is something that can be unlocked from that, and that we can do better in the world. So the butterfly and my decision to accept my fate started to fly again. Trevor, if you can go to the next slide. And then the next. So one of the things I did in chemotherapy, and this is from the same photo shoot that you just saw the photo earlier, is, I was now breastless. I had no hair. Every ounce of my femininity was being challenged. So, as women, we tend to look at our hair, our eyelashes, our eyebrows, our breasts as being representations of our femininity, and I had it all stripped away from me. And so I reached out to a photographer friend of mine who is absolutely incredible, and I wanted to document where I was at this stage. And it was about empowerment. It was about feeling good and accepting my fate and accepting my new body and who I was. And so this photo shoot was just an incredible day, but it didn't stop there. Trevor, if you can move to the next slide. The butterfly keeps flying. After the response to my Globe and Mail article, I felt compelled to write a book with the idea that I was going to bottle up my story in a simple, relatable tale that's actually quite funny at times. It's not dark. And I wanted to pass that knowledge that I had gained along to the next woman who would be diagnosed. And I wanted to, in every chapter, also include information or resources or links to information that I'll call it Ellyn curated, but good information, because again, anybody here that is being diagnosed or is in the process of being diagnosed knows Google is not always our friend, and that we often go down rabbit holes and we start terrifying ourselves, or we join support groups that sometimes can be places of collective trauma themselves. And so I just wanted to give this comforting, positive story so that somebody could read it. And this is what I've had in terms of feedback from people. Women will take it with them to chemo, and they'll read it and say, it feels like you're sitting right next to me. and that if you can do it, I can do it. So I'll never say you got this. I'll never say it's going to be okay, because I don't know that, and I hate the phrase you got this. I feel it puts a lot of pressure on us as someone who's been diagnosed. But I do say I want to hold your hand. I'm going to hold your hand through this. So the other thing that happened because of that photo shoot that we did is that the photographer and I began to work together, and we joined forces with Jenny Dale, who is with Dense Breast Canada and has done some amazing work and is a great friend of this organization. And we decided to do a photo essay that would depict the many faces of breast cancer, looking at it in its most diverse possible way, because women and men and trans males do not see themselves represented in the breast cancer campaigns that are out there. We wanted to show that breast cancer can happen to young women, that it can happen to Black women, Southeast Asian women, that it can happen to males, that it can happen to trans males, the LGBT community. And so we wanted to depict this wide range. So this photo essay, which is called I Want You to Know, depicts 31 faces of individuals with impacted by breast cancer. And it's online. You can see it. You can go and look at it and read the stories of those that were who were depicted. It's available on the Dense Breast Canada website, and it's a work that I'm incredibly proud of. And these individuals who we worked with have become very good friends of mine. But we, again, didn't stop there. The butterfly continues to move. Trevor, if you can go to the next slide. We'll just let the little butterfly flip by. But things get bigger. The ripples in the pool get larger. So in a chance encounter with a tech founder here in the Waterloo region where I live, I introduced him to the fact that I had written a book, and he was full of curiosity. He wanted to understand why I had written the book, why support groups were working for me, why I wanted to pass on my knowledge to another. And to sort of bring him up to speed, I sent the manuscript of my book to him. It hadn't been published yet. And we're in a very interesting world these days with the emergence of interesting for a whole bunch of reasons, but for the emergence of AI and artificial intelligence. And Pat was his name, and Pat was convinced that AI can be used as a force for good, and that there is potential to deliver support at scale that we've just never seen before. And he saw in my book an interesting use case to turn my book and the first person knowledge I had and the empathy that I shared and the knowledge and wisdom that I had inside that book as someone who's gone through a breast cancer journey. He saw the potential to turn it into an artificial intelligence agent. So AskEllyn was born. She is my digital twin. She embodies all the knowledge that is in my book. And yeah, it's crazy. I have a digital duplicate of myself out there. So what's her purpose? Trevor, if you can go to the next slide. So AskEllyn is about companionship. It's about being that friend and that hand that is there to hold yours at any moment of the day. 2 o'clock in the morning. She's completely private. She's non-medical. You can ask her medical questions and she'll answer with my lived experience, but she is never going to give medical advice. And if you ask her a medical question, she will always direct you back to your care team. But she's about empowerment. She's about giving not just women who have been diagnosed, but their family and their friends a comforting person to talk to that can empower them with knowledge so that they don't feel so alone or bewildered about what's going on in their lives. And it's always about support. So AskEllyn speaks every language, and so she is available to support everybody in today's diverse patient population, you know, and not just those individuals who have the resources or the ability to seek out support or the willingness to seek out support. And one of the things that I've learned as we brought AskEllyn to market, because she is multilingual, there is a tremendous amount of shame and blame, profound amount of shame and blame, not just in Western society, but more acutely in other parts of the world and in other cultures, where women's diagnoses of breast cancer is seen as a shameful thing, and women are not even able to talk about it amongst their own family members. And so the thought that Ask Ellyn might be that comforting friend and that solace for that individual at 2 o'clock in the morning when they have no one else to talk to is tremendously potent for me. I'm going to just flip you, if you can, flip me to the next slide. So here's just a few examples. You're more than invited to go to AskEllyn.ai and talk to her yourself and ask whatever questions you want, because she is always going to be free and she is completely private. So we gather no data, we ask for no registrations. But she's there for the patient. So, in this case, I've asked her the question, or I've just, shared that I have been diagnosed with breast cancer and I'm scared. And she'll always respond with an understanding of the sentiment that you've expressed and empathy. And then she'll share my story. So it's like talking to a good friend, where we may not have exactly the same story, but she's there to comfort because she understands. And she'll always end on a supportive note. Trevor, if you can move forward. She's, as I mentioned, not just there for the patient, but also for the family member. There's, for every person that's diagnosed with cancer, I like to estimate that there's probably 10 others in their sort of sphere that, whether it's a husband or a wife or a partner, children, friends, everyone is shocked, everyone is traumatized, and everyone is bewildered on this journey. And not all of us know how to support that person properly. And so Ask Ellyn is there as a coach as well, not just for the patient, but for the family members, so that perhaps they'll say the right thing or do the right thing. And it's advice that comes with learned experience and with empathy. And then the other thing I wanted to show you, if you can just flip the slide, Trevor, is Ask Ellyn's ability to talk in every language. So here we're chatting to her in Arabic, and she's responding in Arabic. So she speaks. There's very few languages that we have tested that she is not able to speak. I know she speaks French and Swedish and German and Arabic and Hindi and Bengali. She even speaks many African dialects, including Yoruba, which is a Nigerian dialect, and Igbo, and Swahili as well. So the potent power of her ability to support people at scale, as I mentioned, well beyond the borders of Canada, is incredibly exciting for me. Trevor, if you can go to the next thing. So the butterfly keeps flapping. So when you go to AskEllyn.ai, it's not just the chat now, but it's also, there is a blog that we have built out that builds on the positivity and the story that began with my book, but now incorporates other women's stories and other women's voices. And so I was just looking at some statistics today. We've had over 12,000 visitors to the website, engaging with the content in the last, let's say, 9 months. We've had, and our chat, the actual chat itself, has seen over 3,000 visitors, and with between a 60 and 70% engagement rate. So people go and they talk to her for up to 3 minutes at a time. So the butterfly, Trevor, you can go to the next slide, continues to fly. I have no idea where we're going, by the way. I can see the North Star of where I'd like to have things move very clearly, but anyone who has built a new initiative or a new venture knows that the next step you might take might be a little murky, but some really exciting things are happening since we launched Ask Ellyn and since I launched and started to expand on the blog. Trevor, you can go to some stats here on the next slide. So Ask Ellyn has now been accessed in over 50 countries and has been spoken to in more than 40 languages. And as I mentioned, has up to a 72% engagement. Majority of our users are North American at this point, and this is all being done off of word of mouth and organic reach. So I'm spending no money here on marketing Ask Ellyn. It is simply that she is being found and is supporting patients and helping patients, and she's spreading like wildfire. If you go to the next slide. I mentioned that Ask Ellyn is private, so we require no registration, we capture no data, but every now and then somebody will reach out to share with us that they have used her and that they have been able to find benefit from her. This was a woman who reached out to me back in June, and she used our feedback toggle. And she said that she had used Ask Ellyn as she was taking her bandages off. She was planning to shower, and she was seeing her scars for the first time. And this one really pierced my heart because I remember so well that feeling of that day and seeing your new body for the first time and viewing an amputation essentially. And it's not something that a doctor or a nurse is going to be present for. It's not something that even your family members may be invited to be part of. It's a very private, very vulnerable moment. And she shared that she had talked to Ask Ellyn and that my answers were relatable to her, that I was a D cup, she was a D cup, that we were both athletic and like to move our bodies. And she said, she said, you just got me through that moment. And I thought, that's exactly what I built this for. And this is what gives me purpose and keeps me going. Trevor, if you go to the next slide. So what's happened is that we've actually started to create an entirely new category called conversational care. My dream is that someday every patient, regardless of their diagnosis, will have an AI that infuses lived experience and the empathy of a fellow survivor into their care journey. So when you're diagnosed with cancer, you're not just given a surgeon and a medical oncologist and a radiation oncologist and maybe a nurse navigator if you're lucky enough in the right system, but you'll be given a chat bot that essentially will understand you at a deep emotional level. Now, if we can go to the next slide. And that dream is now happening. So here I am, the three young ladies that are sitting beside me. We've got Ola and Elaine and Asha. And they are three other change makers who were inspired by the creation of Ask Ellyn to build their own chatbots to solve unique problems in their world. Ola is an African immigrant to Canada and became very frustrated that she was unable to find work here in this country, even though she was incredibly well qualified. So she has created Ask Ola, which actually helps newcomers polish up their resumes and seek work in the Canadian market. Elaine, I met at a youth tech founder conference. They had asked me to come and speak. I shared my story as I'm doing today. And Elaine approached me at the end of the session with tears running down her face. And she shared that she was in grade 10 at the time, actually grade 11 at the time, and had struggled with an eating disorder in her first few years of high school. And she said, I want to do what you've done. And she has now created Hi Eddie, which is a chatbot that supports those that are struggling with eating disorders. And Asha on the far left is only 16 years old, and she has created Ask Eve, which is a chatbot that talks to young girls about menstruation for the first time because she wants women to have autonomy and agency over their own bodies. She's also part of UN Girl Up, and so we'll be bringing Ask Eve to young women around the world in partnership with that organization. If you can just go forward. So we now have a growing army of chatbots that are delivering support at scale. And I'm not even showing you all of them here. There's also an Ask Shan created by a woman who has been diagnosed with early stage Parkinson's. There's Ask Ashley, which is used for individuals who are supporting those with dementia. And there's going to be more. we're actively working toward that goal. My mission, if you can go to the next slide, is that no one diagnosed should walk alone. And I've been very fortunate in the last year and a half that Ask Ellyn has been part of my world and has been alive in the world, that I have assembled some incredible allies in my mission. So we have Dense Breast Canada, who I mentioned before, where we worked on the photo shoot, and we have worked tirelessly with Jenny to ensure that screening for women becomes more accessible and at a younger age. GE Healthcare is a big fan of Ask Ellyn. The Chief Medical Officer of Oncology for GE Healthcare is a gentleman by the name of Dr. Ilya Gip. He fell in love with Ask Ellyn and spoke Russian to her. We did a global webinar together in February of last year, where he interviewed me in a fireside chat, but he also interviewed Ask Ellyn. And he has just recently joined my clinical advisory board, my external clinical advisory board. We have organizations like AstraZeneca who are so excited about what we're doing and are looking for ways that they can support us in reaching the world. We have been selected as part of an organization called the City Cancer Challenge, which is a nonprofit out of Geneva, backed by the World Health Authorities, WHO, the Clinton Health Initiative, the World Bank, UN, just to name a few, including AstraZeneca and GE Healthcare. And City Cancer Challenge is looking to change the way cancer care is delivered at a municipal level. Because again, back to my point that your cancer care and screening is not as broadly available in the rest of the world. So they have 15 cities, soon to be 20, where they're going to be presenting Ask Ellyn along in a library of digital patient navigation tools handpicked by CCAN. There'll be 11 tools presented. They'll be taking those to the cities and working with them to deploy this tooling in different countries of the world. It was shocking to me. I was on a call with them just recently, and there was a Nigerian doctor, and she shared that in Nigeria, there are 200 million people, and there are only 100 oncologists in the entire country. So this notion of support at scale delivered through some digital form of interactive capability, something like Ask Ellyn, it's not just a nice to have, it's a must have. And then the Canadian Cancer Society has come in with us as well. And so they have just recently agreed to fund a clinical research study funded by a digital transformation grant, which will be kicking off in May, led by researchers at Brock University with participation from University of Waterloo and Queen's University. And we'll be looking at Ask Ellyn as a support for patients, for caregivers, and for those marginalized patient communities. Trevor? One more. So what we're starting to see is that AI in the cancer community and in other disease groups can deliver support at X scale. I remind you that Ask Ellyn has been used in 50 countries. There was somebody just this morning talking to her in San Francisco. There are hundreds of users down. She's being deployed into a patient library in Tasmania as we speak. And so what's, I think, very cool is that, you know, this technology can really has the potential to help so many who are walking this journey very much alone at this point. Trevor, if you can go to the next slide. So it's the butterfly effect. Remember, I said, you know, a small ripple. You know, I don't think that I'm anyone special. I am one of 8 ladies who was diagnosed with breast cancer. My story is not extraordinary. I could have easily have just gone back into my life, but it lit in me this desire to help. And I have, you know, seen the butterfly effect in action. You know, what we've created just in a year and a half is now stretching around the world. And so in a turbulent time, and when you're dealing with a cancer diagnosis, you feel very powerless. You feel very out of control. And right now, in the turbulent times we're in, with everything that's going on in the world and with the economy, I think it's also easy to feel powerless about that. And so the message I think I want to share with all of you, whether you're going on your own cancer journey, walking that road, or whether you're just feeling powerless about the world around us, is that none of us are powerless. We actually have incredible potential to affect change if we just allow the universe to take us there. Trevor, last slide. So the butterfly keeps flying. I don't know where we're going next. I think there's some really exciting things that are going to happen. So stay with my story and come back and visit quite often, because the butterfly is not done flying yet. Trevor, next slide. So I'd like to thank you very much for your time today and for listening to me and hearing my story. Again, I invite you to go to AskEllyn.ai, explore the content that's on the blog. If there's any breast cancer survivors out there listening, if you're interested in sharing your story, you just have to reach out to me. My Instagram account is called Flat Please. You can reach me there. You can find me on Instagram as well, but I would be more than happy to invite you to share your stories as well. And yeah, and as I say, stay tuned, because I think the butterfly is absolutely not done yet in terms of the flight that she's taking. And thank you.
Thank you very much, Ellyn. That was a fantastic conversation, and I think that it's very interesting. We'll have a link to Ask Ellyn on the description of this webinar whenever it goes up. So thank you very much for your time. Once again, if you want to ask a question to the real Ellyn, please have it in the questions tab on the GoToWebinar page. My question, when it comes to AI.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of talk is about the ethical concerns, and one of the things I really loved about this story in particular was that with all these groups using copyright material for not so nice reasons, what kind of ethical conversations around it? Because it's just based on your book and it's just based on what you've written. So that definitely is a thumbs up in a lot of it. But what were kind of those conversations ethical wise about finally deciding to use AI to bring this, instead of saying the traditional method of just having someone to intentionally program a chatbot from scratch?
Yeah, I think that well, so I think there's a few things. So definitely we were incredibly conscious of the fact as we built Ask Ellyn that we were building her for a patient community. It's a very vulnerable, people are in a very vulnerable place, obviously. And so that was, really sort of the thinking behind, ensuring that she's non-medical. We didn't want to, be the WebMD of AI here. We just really wanted to stay in the friend zone, because that is what most people are really craving, is to feel less alone. And then, the other ethical, obviously, when you're working in healthcare, you have to be very cognitive of, HIPAA and PHIPAA, so, data privacy and concerns about, confidentiality of information. And so the team that built her, it's a company by the name of Gambit, put in place some very good safeguards to ensure that we protected people's privacy. Again, we don't have any registration form. We don't know who's using it. I see data about, where they are in the world, but I can't identify as to who that individual is. And then even the questions that are asked, they're not recorded. They're essentially just kind of erased from memory. We do keep an eye on the questions just to make sure that Ask Ellyn is answering appropriately and not, doing things like hallucinating. But the questions, actually we use AI to restate the questions so that so all of the information is anonymized, and so we'll get the essence of what somebody's asking, but not the exact words that they would have used to protect us. And then, it kind of goes to a question of, I think there's a lot of, navel gazing when it comes to AI, and, worry about security and privacy and ethics and all of that. Um, but I think this is a very good use case of how it can be used in a more controlled way with the proper guardrails around it, connected to a real person, so that that would give people comfort. If they engage with AskEllyn, you ask Ellyn if she's real, she'll tell you I'm a real person, and she'll even guide you to my Instagram account. You can come talk to the real me. So I think that there's an element of comfort. It's just, I guess we could stay in this space of navel gazing and say, oh, I can see all the reasons why we should never use this. But I think the dreaming of the art of the possible and seeing how many people we can help outweighs any ethical concerns I might have. I think we can solve for those, but the potential to unleash support at this kind of a scale, these are people who are not getting any comfort or support these days, and the medical system can't support them in the way that they need to be emotionally. And so I asked the question. I guess I could say, why should I? But why wouldn't we? Is really the answer.
Absolutely.
Long-winded question. Answer your question.
Definitely. And if you have any more questions, anyone who wants to ask a question can put it in the GoToWebinar tab. One final question from me. Do you have any plans on adding more material from yourself, or say
Mm,
another book or thing, or is it an ongoing process where you're constantly updating the chatbot?
yeah.
How do you add more material, and how do you add it?
Yeah, so we do have the ability to add content to her knowledge. And so because my story carries on. For example, I'll give you an example. My book, if you read my book, ends with me banging the gong. I had to end it somewhere. And so it ends with me banging the gong after I finished radiation and I was still bald. But Ask Ellyn now talks about uh, chemo curls and hair care, and she understands that I'm taking Zometa infusions for bone density strengthening. And so yes, so the short answer is yes, we do have the ability to add content to her. We for those that are interested, what they're going to experience is the free version of Ask Ellyn. Ask Ellyn is a licensable object, and so we are in conversations with organizations, and this is how things would play out with City Cancer Challenge, is Ask Ellyn could be incorporated into another website or an intranet or a patient portal, and her knowledge could be enhanced. It wouldn't change my story. My story is going to always be the same story, but we could make her organizationally aware or health system aware. So, stay tuned. There potentially could be a Nairobi version of Ask Ellyn in the near future.
Excellent. Well, thank you very much. That's all the time we have for today, and definitely will for the description of this podcast. We'll definitely have Ask Ellyn in there because, again, it's a very fantastic resource and a very exciting resource and a very good way of showing how this technology can be put to a very good use. So, thank you very much for your time, Ellyn, and hopefully we can have you on a podcast eventually as
I
well.
love that. I'd love that.
Perfect. All right, and now this is a series that we're having in our webinar series. We're going to have some other ones planned for the spring, and we also have some lined up for the fall. So if you want to see everything that's happening with our organization, make sure that you sign up for our e-blast on our website and subscribe to our newsletter. If you're not seeing our newsletter in your inbox, we do use a third-party email service, so please check your spam folders and make sure that you subscribe to everything for what we're doing here at CCSN. If you want to check out all our webinars, you can go to survivornet.ca/webinar or go to CCSN's YouTube channel. And with that, I bid everyone a good afternoon, and we'll see you on the next one.